friends, and welcome to The World Transformed. My name is Phil Bowermaster, and with me in the virtual studio is my co-host, Stephen Gordon. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Phil, how are you?
Well, I am super fantastic. How are you, my friend?
Man, I'm doing great, and kind of wanted to talk some UFOs. Maybe just to debunk them or something. What are you up for this evening?
Oh, well, no, I'm going to show that they're real, actually, as a matter of fact. Debunk? Well, for one thing, you've jumped straight to the UFO term, whereas people who've clicked on the show here, they think we're going to talk about Strange New Worlds and the return of the Foo Fighters. They're probably thinking, what is that, a new tour for the band, right?
The band was named after Nazi-era UFOs, World War II-era UFOs in Europe.
World War II-era UFOs, and we're going to get to those in just a bit. And we're going to get to UFOs in just a bit. But, hey, before we get into what sounds like is going to be a debate about whether UFOs are real, let's talk a little stuff that we know actually is real, a little space news that is real, because this is kind of the coming and going approach to life on other worlds. Okay, so are they out there and we're going to find them, or are they coming here? Okay, so the Strange New Worlds and Return of the Foo Fighters. Foo Fighters is them coming here. Strange New Worlds is us finding them out there. Could there be life? This newfound super Earth may be habitable. This is a news story from just this week, and we got a new exoplanet looking Earth-like, and this one's only about 31 light years from Earth, believed to be about twice the size of the Earth and 6 times more massive. So got a kind of a Krypton feel to it for any of the inhabitants there. They're going to be growing up under massive gravity, but it's right in that star's habitable zone. So it could have water on its surface. This is a planet.
It's in the outer edge of the habitable zone. So I would guess that would mean that it would probably be just slightly cooler than Earth. Earth is actually on the inside edge of our star's habitable zone. We're almost in a place that would be too hot, and this would be on the outer edge of that. So it'd probably be a little bit of a colder planet, and like you say, so much gravity that one would wonder if they would ever be able to be the UFOs, right? How you get off your home world if you have that as as an initial issue, right? You got so much gravity you can't break that gravity well, so.
Well, maybe that's better. That's what we want. We want aliens waiting for us to come see them, right? I mean, because we'll get to the alternative here in a moment. That's better. I'd rather have aliens on these big, heavy planets where they don't leave, and we can fly the Starship Enterprise over to them and break the prime directives and get all mixed up in their politics and that kind of stuff.
Here's a funny thing, Phil. It's a neighboring world basically. It's only 31 or so light years away, and we still just have letter designations for it. This is DJ357D. We're really going to have to get around to actually giving these places real names, aren't we?
Well, we are going to have to. Now, I mean, to me that suggests there must be a GJ357A through C at least.
Right. That maybe or maybe they're just leaving room in the address sequence to add those planets were they to discover that there's 4 planets closer, right? Or let's see, 3 planets closer. Excuse me. I had to actually A is 1. I had to count it out. This is would be the 4th planet if that's the case. But maybe they've got 3 other planets there, or maybe they don't. But they got room.
You raise a great issue there, Stephen, which is what happens when this reminds me so much. I'm sorry, let's just totally geek out here for a moment of Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. This is SETI Alpha 5, right? Where they think they're
yeah. This right? is supposed to be. We put you on SETI Alpha 5, not SETI Alpha 6. This is exactly.
Yeah, that's exactly right. This isn't SETI Alpha 6. So what happens when you've got a whole solar system mapped out and go, okay, so here's planet A, here's planet B, here's planet C, and then you find a planet between B and C.
Then you have to go C1 or C2. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, That's confusing stuff. That's hard stuff. But if we give them names, then we don't have to worry about that. So another good reason to come up with names. But naming is not going to be an easy thing to do. I want to reference this next story. The hunt is on for Alpha Centauri's planets. Listen to this. This is a story we've been tracking over the years anyway. On June 13th, NASA's official tally of exoplanets, planets beyond our solar system, shot past 4,000. So you got 4,000 names for these planets. That's the problem. We're
gonna have to name them like streets of a city. There's a Maple Drive in many different cities. There might be planet Maple in many solar systems. It's just where there's going to be some repetition, no doubt, when we actually are out there exploring them. But I mean, you and I both can remember well when that number 4,000 was not even one. Right, I mean the first.
That's right.
Exoplanet. I think the first exoplanet was in the 90s, right?
Yes, I mean they as early as the late 80s, they were identifying brown dwarfs, and they were saying, hey, there could be something here. There's probably a planet here, but I mean they didn't really narrow any down until the late 90s, and the age of truly discovering exoplanets has been the past 15 years, right?
Right. You know, if somebody in 100 years listening to this recording would start laughing and saying 4,000. You know, the age of exoplanets is now. You know, is what they would say.
And they'll be right, because they'll probably know millions of planets, literally millions of planets by then, if not more than that. But what we do know now is so much more information than we had initially. The first big step was, that's it. There's really a planet there. We see this ripple, and there's definitely a planet. Now we know some things about them. We know where they're orbiting. We have some idea of what they're composed of. We have some idea of what size they are. So we're starting to look at exoplanets. We're saying, okay, we're looking for the ones that are Earth-like, because we figured those are where the action is. In this solar system, as far as we know, Earth is where the action is. And if there's anything big going on elsewhere, they're keeping it under wraps. They're not advertising. So elsewhere in the galaxy, it only makes sense. We're looking for Earth-like planets. And so here we've got this one with the long string of letters and numbers, which is its name. And this story in Scientific American talking about looking for planets in Alpha Centauri. Why? Well, whereas the one we were just talking about is 31 light years away, Alpha Centauri is only about 4 light years away. And of course, we talked about on the show Proxima Centauri, which is the third star in that binary system with a third star, however you want to describe Alpha Centauri.
Trinary,
Trinary, I suppose. But Proxima has an Earth-like planet, Earth-sized, roughly, planet orbiting it. We discovered that about a year ago, I guess, which is exciting. But Proxima is a dwarf star, and we don't know if there could be – we have no idea really what the conditions will be like on a planet orbiting a dwarf star. But we know that it's sufficiently different from a star like the Sun that we can't suppose too much about what's going on there.
With a dwarf star, you have the habitable zone is so close to the dwarf star that it's thought that a planet in that habitable zone would be locked to that star. In other words, showing the same side of itself to the star at all times, the way the moon does. We only see one side of the moon because it's tidally locked to the Earth, so that we only see one side of it. So what does life look like? One part of the planet would be too hot, right? And there might be a ring of habitability in the twilight edge of such a planet. The far side of the planet would be cold, frozen, and then baked in the middle, and maybe just this ring that could be lived at. But still, it's exciting, isn't it? So that something so close.
Well, it's exciting that there's a planet there, and what's really going to be exciting is if they find something around Alpha Centauri A or B. If they find an Earth-like planet there, because those stars are pretty Sun-like, and not only are they pretty similar to the Sun, they're a bit older. They're about 10% older. So as much time as we've had to develop life and to develop civilization, any planet orbiting one of the Alpha Centauri stars has had even more time. It's our next door neighbor, and wouldn't it be cool if something is happening there? Now, the problem is it's been very hard.
I'm reminded of the Hitchhiker's Guide. You recall that that Earth's notice that they were going to be destroyed was posted on the bulletin board at Alpha Centauri, and you can't be bothered to go down to your local office to find out these things, then you deserve to be destroyed.
It was just over in Alpha Centauri, so what's your excuse for not going to find out? Yeah, and that's the thing, and that will be our impetus, I think, for star travel, right? For an actual interstellar probe, or maybe voyage one of these days, will be if we find something really interesting there. It's like, well, don't get me wrong, very, very long distance, but by galactic standards, it's as close as you can get, and worth going to have a look, for sure. So the Scientific American article explains why it's hard to find those planets and why it might be getting easier here over the next few months. So we're going to be watching this space very carefully. Here's hoping they find some interesting planets around those other two stars in Alpha Centauri. Although, to your point, Stephen, it might be worth taking a trip just to see that star around Proxima Centauri. Actually, it'd be worth a trip anyway.
There are some things in the works. One of the more interesting things, Phil, and we mentioned in this show probably about a year and a half ago, something like that one of these programs is to send basically a swarm of little probes, very tiny probes, so that if a fraction of your probes get destroyed, it's okay. The mission can still be done, and these things can radio back what they find when they get to the neighboring star system. These things would be pushed by laser to get to a substantial fraction of the speed of light, and so it'd be about a 20-year journey, apparently. That's the thinking, and would require the development of all kinds of technologies we don't currently have, but apparently there's no real reason it couldn't be done. So there's really smart people thinking about things like that.
It is worth doing. Think about it. If we launched them tomorrow, take 20 years to get there, 4 years to get the signal back.
Right.
As soon as we start that image, as soon as we start that project, we're 24 years out from seeing what's going on in another star system. That's exciting. That is definitely worth doing. I hope they get those underway. And in fact, those programs are referenced in this story in the Scientific American. So highly recommended reading there. Think about the exoplanets, and let's think about representative technology or people from Earth going to other planets. But now let's flip it around and talk about we are not alone, Stephen. Okay, if there's aliens in Alpha Centauri, they're not alone, and they're gonna find out eventually when we come see them. But here we've got snake-like UFOs seen across the U.S. I'm going to tell you, that's the first I've heard of this. I didn't know we had snake-like UFOs being seen across the U.S. Could be military craft used by Space Force. So we know we got this new up-and-coming branch of the military, the Space Force, and they've already got some very interesting craft potentially that they're flying out there. Snake-like UFOs. What do we know about this?
Well, they're weird, and apparently it might be multiple crafts that fly in kind of weird patterns or whatever, they in weird formations. Don't know a whole lot about them, do we, Phil? I would say that if they turn out to be military aircraft, experimental aircraft, that would not be the first time that experimental aircraft has been thought of to be UFOs. The SR-71 Blackbird, when it was being flown secretly, would be reported regularly as a UFO. Things like that. It's happened many times.
It's a pretty common pattern. If you follow the link here, by the way, you should definitely check out this snake-like UFO. I would almost consider it more of a worm-like UFO. Something that's like a snake is like a worm, I suppose. But that is a weird thing to see up in the sky. And if that is some kind of experimental craft, it looks very different from anything that we've seen in our experience. But what you have to remember is when you see something like this, you see this blob of light, you're not seeing everything, right?
Right.
What you might be seeing is a swarm of smaller craft. You might be seeing just one piece of it, something like that.
Seems like about a year ago, Phil, we were talking about the swarms of drone swarms being tested by the military. So that it could easily be something like that, easily. So.
And it seems obviously most likely that it's something along those lines. And to your point, this has happened before. People have looked out in the night sky or even the daytime sky, and they've seen mysterious objects, and it's turned out that it was experimental military aircraft, or just aircraft that we weren't familiar with yet. We know that when the Department of Defense was developing the B-1 bomber, that there were sightings of that as a UFO for years leading up to it finally being announced.
Right.
The stealth bomber that looked different from every other aircraft. So it's been a fairly common occurrence throughout the history of aviation. And the whole idea of UFOs, when you take that abbreviation and really read it out, what's it mean? Unidentified flying objects, stuff in the sky, and we don't know what it is, right? So we look at something and we say, wow, that is the weirdest thing ever. But it doesn't necessarily mean, in fact, there's not any particularly good reason to believe that it's an alien spacecraft. And I think that's kind of what this second story that you list here, a trio of ASU, it's Arizona State, I suppose, ASU experts give their thoughts on recent UFO reports. This is interesting because it ties into something we haven't actually had a chance to talk about since we were on hiatus. We haven't talked about the big kind of reveal about UFOs, which occurred a little bit earlier in the summer around these kind of verified, confirmed sightings of UFOs on naval ships and by Navy aircraft that occurred in 2014 and 2015. This is kind of a big story, and it appears to be just the tip of the iceberg of a bunch more data that's going to be coming out, a bunch more information about people seeing UFOs and it not simply being dismissed, right? I guess that's kind of the difference. The government is saying, yeah, well, something's going on here. These guys are definitely seeing something. So we've got this response to that from these three academics, and one of them is really good.
Yeah.
Guy talks about how easy it is to get confused about what you're seeing in the night sky, right?
You will see something, even an experienced pilot will see Venus right on the horizon, and because it's the way it's shining through the atmosphere, it can flash red and green, just like the lights of an airplane. That is often confused by experienced pilots. So imagine somebody that doesn't have the experience and they see something strange. All of a sudden it's ET coming, right? But no, it's hardly ever ET, is it, Phil? It's usually something quite explainable.
Well, we'll get to that. What's interesting is I read that explanation. I thought, well, there you go. It's the moon, it's Venus, it's swamp gas, it's ball lightning. All the explanations that you've read through the years. But then if you go back and revisit this story, these pilots talking about objects flying at hypersonic speeds at altitude up to 30,000 feet, making these odd banks and odd twists and odd turns and things like that. These guys aren't just seeing Venus, right? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's the reason that this is kind of being acknowledged, is they're seeing something. Not the full moon. It's not Venus. And it's not something else.
Nor are these crackpots either. These are professional pilots and military people and things like that. The crackpot vibe is you're past that at this point. You're not
there's
doing
no
so much
crackpot thing going on there, and no motivation to try to be famous or any of that kind of stuff either. They're just just filing reports on their ship. But this quote was interesting because I think it's interesting when you say, look, it's not just the moon. This was no boating accident, right? But when you read this, none of the pilots suggest that these perplexing UFOs represent an extraterrestrial invasion, right? That's the thing. They're all saying, I don't know what this is, but none of them are saying that they think they're alien spacecraft.
We civilians out here in the world, right? UFO, that's always little green men. UFO, unidentified flying object. It can very easily could be of earthly origin. It's just something we don't know what is.
If you follow the history of this has been going on for a long time, and that's where we get the Foo Fighters. What were the mysterious Foo Fighters sighted by World War II night flyers? And follow the link, read this story. But there was one particular set of sightings of these over the Rhine Valley in the late days of World War II. And there's a really good account of one of these pilots encountering these odd lights coming up close, flying with them, flying in formation, and once again doing things that it would seem no aircraft could possibly do. Well, there were numerous Foo Fighter, the original Foo Fighters sightings, but also there were just lots of these kinds of sightings all through World War II. We had a lot of birds in the air at that time, and a lot of people seeing these strange things. It's been going on for a very long time. What is it? Well, for the current Navy sightings, one of the explanations is this is technology that the government's working on that hasn't been acknowledged yet. This is technology from another country that is stealth technology, or that they're not revealing what it is. And the popular theory at the time, back in World War II, these were secret Nazi weapons. Maybe, but it's interesting that the Nazis were working on stuff back then that we still don't know what it is. 70 years.
Well, if they were secret Nazi weapons, then our Germans, and we got the best Germans, right, Bill? Maybe we didn't get the UFO Germans. We didn't get the Foo Fighter Germans.
We didn't get the Foo Fighter Germans because they didn't tell us how to do that, right? They told us how to get to the moon, but they didn't tell us how to make these orange lights fly in formation and what they were doing. It's the almost logic-defying side of it that is frustrating to people. And, of course, UFO is one term. Flying saucer is another. And when you think flying saucer, then you're closer to saying alien spacecraft. And there have been sightings for a long time of craft. And, there's Roswell, and then there's people who say that they've actually had encounters with aliens. And so there's this whole field of this stuff going on. But it all goes back to people seeing things in the sky. And I think the problem we run into is we have to classify it. We look at it and we say, well, we've got to say what it is, right? So,
yeah.
And unfortunately, our options now are alien spacecraft or not alien spacecraft, which means find something as mundane as possible, right? So it's either an alien spacecraft or it's you're just mistaken, right? You don't know what you're seeing. And with the third possibility being somebody else's aircraft. Those are kind of the three possibilities. Well, I'm just gonna leave it by saying there's a fourth possibility, and I'm not going to define it, but it's something else, right? And I think these are something else. I think that it's not the moon, it's not Venus, it's not ball lightning, it's not somebody's experimental craft, and it's probably not alien spacecraft either. It's something that we don't know what it is yet, and that's frustrating for people.
Are you suggesting it's a natural phenomenon that we don't quite have a handle on?
Probably. But I'm not even going that far. I'm saying we just don't know. I'm saying that not knowing is frustrating, so we try to, we're pattern recognizers and we try to make sense of these things, but that maybe the key word really is unidentified. There's weird stuff going up in the sky. We'd like to know what it is, and we still don't know.
With UFOs, it's best to employ Occam's razor is the way I think about these things, is that the simplest explanation and the explanation that requires the fewest out there assumption is often the correct one. So many times it turns out to be some celestial object that's shining through the atmosphere in some way that's a little unusual, and so we don't quite recognize it as what it is, and so we report as UFOs really mundane things like Venus and the moon and even Jupiter and things like that. That's interesting, but some of these other things don't really fall into that. Of course, there's the crackpots. If you take away the things that are mundane sightings of the moon, the just weird atmospheric stuff going on, and you take out the crackpot stuff, I think you probably removed 90% of the UFO sightings. And what's left, though, could be very interesting.
It's still very strange. By trying to make it completely mundane, I think you'll lose the fact that there's something weird going on, something that we don't know what it is. And,
well, you mentioned a couple of times ball lightning. That's pretty weird stuff.
That is weird. Yeah.
Ball lightning, I guess, if we understand ball lightning correctly, and it's pretty mysterious itself, it's a plasma, the atmospheric discharge of plasma, which is different from regular lightning, right? And it can do all kinds of weird things, apparently. And they fly around in erratic ways and all kinds of who knows? It could be stuff we just don't completely understand yet that's completely a natural phenomenon.
We don't. And because of that, because I don't know, because I'm saying I really don't know, and this is actually an agreement with one of the three ASU professors linked in the earlier story, I'm not ruling out alien spacecraft. But I think we did a show years ago called Aliens Are Stupid, right? And we just talked about if it were alien spacecraft, what is their point? What are they doing? What, all that to say is this is not how I would visit another planet. Okay, this is not the way I would.
We probably should explain to them that probing of various orifices is just not friendly. That's not how you say hello.
Well, leave our cattle alone, for crying out loud. I mean, here's the thing.
That's right. Stop stomping on and making weird patterns and stomping on our grain out in our fields. That's just not good.
I've been listening to The 37th Parallel by Ben Mesrich. He wrote the Social Network and other bestsellers. This is a book about, it's called The Secret Truth Behind America's UFO Highway. I won't get into all the details of what goes on in the book, but it involves a Colorado deputy sheriff who's done his own investigation into UFOs over the past 30 years, and it's fascinating stuff. I'm reading it with a very jaundiced, skeptical eye, and as entertaining as I find this kind of stuff, I keep my distance. But I got to tell you, Stephen, and check the book out, I am the least likely person in the world to think all this stuff is for real and just to buy into it immediately. But this book has got me about halfway convinced on cattle mutilation, of all things. Okay, so I will leave it with that. There's weird stuff that happens in the world. I don't know what that phenomenon is, but it's something very, very, very strange. And
well, you know, E.T., if you're monitoring this show, if you want a steak, we'll fix you a steak. Show up, you know, we'll have a barbecue. It'd be great.
You are not even eating the right parts of the cow. Let me tell you, this is
exactly. You got it all wrong. We will show you. Hey, we're natives to this planet. We know what's good, and we'll fix it right for you. So
we know how to do this. Absolutely, we will set you up. Come any Saturday night. I'm almost always making steaks. Come on by, and we'll get you going. And we were talking before the show, Stephen, that it used to be that I was Scully and you were Mulder. I think maybe we're slowly over time we're transitioning between those two.
Yeah, roles, it could be. It could be that I'm a little bit more of a skeptic than you are these days, Phil, and that's interesting because 10 years ago it was the other way. So
yeah, I'm buying into the not buying into. I'm taking a new look at some of this spooky stuff. I don't think in the end we're going to find aliens, but I think in the end we are going to find something very interesting, and it's worth continuing to look at. And with that, I will say, Stephen, hey, it's great talking with you. It's great having you all with us. We are going to be back very soon with another brand new show. And until next time, live to see.